Hey everybody, welcome to the I Am Podcast YouTube channel.
Make sure to tap the bell, subscribe, and comment down below.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the I Am Podcast.
Today we have a very special guest. Cindy, would you please introduce yourself?
Thank you so much. I'm Cindy Wasser. I'm the founder and principal lawyer of Hope Springs Fertility Law in Toronto, Canada. And it is my pleasure to speak with you ladies today because I'm such a great fan of Venu and what you're doing. Thank you. I'm honored to be on your podcast.
We're honored to have you.
Yes, we were so excited that this worked and that you were able to come join us and your story is so unique and I think it's so important.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Cindy, okay, first, before we get into like the good stuff, why did you become a lawyer?
Yeah, what brought you to law in the first place?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, it's a long story, but it really, thank you for asking that one. It's a big one, so I'll try to keep it short because I am very wordy. When I was 11 years old, we were watching the news on TV, and there was this man they showed in jail. And he looked a bit like Colonel Sanders from Kentucky Fried Chicken and Santa Claus. He just had the kindest, most loving face.
Yeah.
He didn't look like the kind of person an 11-year-old would expect to see in jail. So I asked my mother why that man was in prison, and she turned to me and said, because he tried to help women. Maybe one day you will too. That man was Dr. Henry Morgentaler, and he was in prison in Nova Scotia for committing an abortion without getting permission of the therapeutic committee of the hospital. And his case went all the way up to the Supreme Court of Canada in the 80s, where they said abortion is a fundamental right of a woman.
Right.
Shortly after the prison episode, I learned from my brother during a massive fight where he was hitting me over the head with a telephone, which was not unusual. Probably now I'd say I encouraged it. And I was yelling something silly like, you're a poopy face, as kids did. He said, well, yeah, you were supposed to be an abortion. And I didn't even know what that was. So I went to my mother, and I still never found out how he knew. But the story was, I was born in 1961, so I've just aged myself for anyone who knows math. But I was the last of three. My father wanted 6 children. My mother was done. And at the time, you had to go to Buffalo from Toronto, and we called it the Buffalo Shuffle, and you needed your husband's consent to have an abortion, and he wouldn't consent. Of course, my mother, she's gone now, but she always said she's so glad she had me. But my response to her story was not, how dare you? It was one of great empathy. How could that be?
Yeah.
How could you not have made that decision? What did he have to do with it?
Yeah.
And why go to Buffalo?
Yeah.
You know? And I was very young. And that's when she reminded me of Henry Morgentaler and what he has done and what our prime minister did, because Pierre Trudeau was prime minister still at the time. But it was just a few years after I was born, when I was 7, where he was the Minister of Justice when he drafted the omnibus bill that's very famous in Canada for taking homosexuality out of the criminal code. But a little known fact of, is that that bill also said the birth control pill would be legal in Canada and that therapeutic abortion would start in Canada. And the next year, he won a massive election in 1968 and became the prime minister for the first of 16 years. And that's how I grew up in that culture. And that was obviously very important to my mother, given what had happened to her. So I also grew up with a sense of social justice. She was also a Holocaust survivor, kept in hiding by a righteous Catholic family in Poland. Truly righteous, truly Catholic. So I grew up with that sense of our existence was a real miracle.
Right.
And we owed it to the world to give back. And for me, in my family, it was social justice. We were huge Trudeau fans. My parents were very political, both with Canada and the state of Israel. And so there were political fundraisers in my home all the time as a little girl hiding behind the banister to look at the very fancy parties. And I just grew up with that. I was knocking on doors to save seals, things of that nature. So, with that upbringing, it was evident to me that I was going to do something special in the world. And that was human rights education. So, law school was the way to do that. So, but day one of law school took me in a different direction, sort of, which was criminal law. I fell in love with criminal law. And that was because, and it was a great time because Trudeau, who was still prime minister in the 80s, was working on repatriating Canada's constitution. So when I graduated in 1985, he brought home our constitution from England and signed the Charter of Rights of Canada on April 11th, the year I graduated. And as a criminal lawyer, I got to argue every new charter case, including working on Morgenthaler's Supreme Court of Canada file. And that was how it began. I had a charmed career in criminal law, working for the best top criminal lawyers who taught me everything about fighting values, building a practice, and helping society at the same time. So that's what I did for almost 30 years, and then met my husband to be at 42 and found out I was already too old to have my own family. So, with the help of a magnificent woman as an egg donor who we're still very friendly with and I adore, um, and a surrogate, we had our first child, Etta, who's now almost 16, 15 and a half, and actually works for me at Hope Springs. She
cool.
does correspondence with our clients.
Oh, cool.
That's so cool. What a
The
beautiful
long
story.
story.
It's beautiful. Wow.
So how did fertility law find you then? Was it through your own journey or had you already come to it?
Yeah, so Lorraine and Anu did not, well, Lorraine existed, of course. Anu did not
Yeah.
exist the time that we did it. It was right after 2004 where the federal legislation said no more paying donors, surrogates, that's illegal. And so at the time, all the clinics had donors like they do in the US, and they all dropped it because if you can't make money, why would you invest in that? So we had to find a donor on our own. There was not a single agency. And then there was only one surrogacy agency, which was the remarkable Joanne, who passed away, who ran Canadian Surrogacy Options. And I had friends, a forensic psychologist and his wife, who did it in their 50s, and they had a great experience. So I contacted them, and they introduced me to a lawyer they said was the best in the country. And they just couldn't find us a surrogate. And eventually that lawyer suggested I look for surrogate on Craigslist because she had clients who found a donor that way. And my first instinct was that is absolutely not going to happen. I don't even think I'd buy a car on Craigslist, although that's the most popular thing to do. I can live with the monetary loss of being scammed, but not making a baby. But there's a very well-known fact around the world that we lawyers make the worst clients because we think we know better, so we don't listen. Adding to that, my upbringing, my Jewish upbringing of asking every question with another question instead of answering it, I thought, I better not be that client and get fired. So I listened to her and we put the ad in Craigslist, and the next day we found a surrogate.
No shit.
And at the
Wow.
time, we were coordinating donor and surrogate cycles for fresh transfers, and we were at the ReproMed clinic, which the agency had also recommended. And so once we got all that organized, which was quite the feat, our surrogate got pregnant with the first transfer, and we have Etta. So that was a miracle. Unfortunately, between the first blood test and the second was a weekend where, unbeknownst to all of us, she went camping and was off the grid. So both the clinic and I were repeatedly calling her to arrange the second blood test. And on Sunday night, when she came home from her camping trip and had all these myriad of messages, she responded to both with a very angry, crazy tone, um, and indicated that she was so upset with us for calling her and she has privacy. And it just went from there. In 3 weeks, when she was pregnant, I thought to myself, and didn't want to believe it, that based on my experience with many clients, I was dealing with a pathological personality. And I'll tell you, there's a huge difference with having a client in prison for murder who's pathological, who calls you in the middle of the night and just says your name 1,000 times and you can keep hanging up and block the call and unplug the phone, or who acts up in the courtroom. There's a big difference between that and dealing with it with the woman who's carrying your baby in her womb, who could terminate the pregnancy on a moment's notice, something which I helped create, but still didn't regret. But, and having to tread the fine line of keeping her happy, keeping my baby safe, and keeping our sanity in tow. And my partner, my husband, just had no experience with this and fell apart, really. It was very stressful. So I had what's still known in Canada at 15 years later as the worst journey ever. Many silver linings, however, because I'm a very positive thinker, especially given my mom's background. You have to be. Um, the silver linings, number one, of course, was we had a healthy, perfect baby in spite of everything the surrogate put us through. And the story is published in Toronto Life magazine, the biggest magazine for culture and arts in Toronto, about 10 years ago. And so if anyone Googles my name in the magazine, please don't look at how much I've aged, but Edda sure has. She was 5 years old the day they came to take pictures on her birthday. And Janelle was just a baby and she's now almost 13. So, but the silver lining of that story was that the day it came out, a couple read it, contacted me through the author, the journalist, and they had a surrogate who was then 32 weeks pregnant. And they couldn't believe they were reading their story in that magazine, every detail of what I explained. So the journalist contacted me right away and connected us. And it turns out they live right around the corner from me. Our kids are growing up in the same park at the same farmer's market every Tuesday afternoon. And she and her husband are also pretty learned. He was a corporate lawyer in a huge law firm. She's a specialist in allergies, for pediatric allergies, and top hospital, top law firm, and they got hoodwinked. And so I helped them through the rest of their pregnancy. When the surrogate would say there's no doctor's appointment, I'd say go anyway, and of course she'd be there. She did everything. So I didn't realize that the silver lining of my journey could actually help real people going through it. And my voice at every medical conference for fertility doctors was heard at the mic saying, you have a role and a duty to help your patients. This is a difficult process. And I'm proud to say, after years of being snickered at, that's a very important role of what the Canadian Fertility and Andrology Society does now, training clinics to be empathetic. I used to get a voice message from a nurse left saying how many embryos died each day. Now you have counseling. Because to us, even me, well, Morgenthaler, those embryos had a life. I had graduation parties, weddings in my mind, names, birthday parties, everything. And I was burying a baby every day, and multiple babies. And it sounded crazy, but it's what I think every parent goes through during that, even though we know in our minds they aren't. As a mom who had an egg donor, in my heart, my husband met with the egg donor in a cheesy motel and they had sex to create a baby for me. My brain knew exactly that they hadn't even met and it was all done in a lab, but I ate a heck of a lot of ice cream on those days. And that's what I tell my clients. And now I can laugh and you're smiling because we feel that. And so every time I talk to intended parents with all their anxiety and concern and grief, I can share that and laugh. And when there's tense time or a loss, I listen with great compassion. Where everyone else might be frustrated because their marriage ended and they want their surrogate to terminate a pregnancy, for example, I can say, go get a box of Magnum ice cream bars and eat with me in silence. I'm sitting in the dark with you and I'm going to help you through this because I get it. And a lot of people just don't. And so my practice, I decided the major silver lining, I suppose, an hour after Etta was born was I decided to fix this. And I turned to my husband in the hospital and I said, no one should ever have to go through this to have a baby in this country. This has to change, and it will. And Hope Springs Fertility
Goosebumps.
Law was born. Look at you getting shivers.
Right.
That's what everyone does. Um, Hope Springs Fertility Law was born in the hospital about an hour after Etta, and it is now the largest fertility law firm in Canada. And to remain true to my vision and my values, I had to grow the firm so that I could continue the political work, the growth in the industry. So I have lawyers who work for me, admin staff, and we're growing and growing all the time. Um, and I have been contacted by governments around the world to consult with their plans to develop surrogacy laws based on the Canadian policy. So Ireland, the UK, the Netherlands, um, Denmark. I was in Borgen, the famous parliament of the Netflix series in Copenhagen 2 Junes ago around this time, meeting with health ministers and at their political sort of Woodstock political forum on the island. I had a beach house and met with everybody under the sun and even the former Secretary General of NATO. So my life has been incredible. I know, talking surrogacy to him while he was making a speech about military safety in space, which was one of the few in English, so it was fascinating.
No kidding.
The other was a QAnon group on vaccination, so I had to listen to that. It was equally fascinating but different. But everything else was in a language I couldn't understand. So, but it was incredible to have those experiences. And I travel around the world to speak at conferences for growing families in England, Australia, and for men having babies in Europe and the United States. So I've been able to bring in lots of business. I don't just say, hire me, Cindy, hire Hope Springs Fertility Law. I say, come to Canada. And so that benefits all the agencies. And I've worked with Health Canada and our government continuously to explain that a number of things. Not only are we good guys by helping people in countries where it's illegal to do surrogacy and it's illegal to be gay, and they might be beheaded for doing it, you know. So we are good guys for saying come here. But what's most important is that I explain to our government it's financially smart, like our immigration policies, because not only are the intended parents putting money into the country while they're here, but they're paying for the birth of their babies in our hospitals and subsidizing the hospitals because they get nothing from us when we have babies. But they get to bill foreigners for a healthy day a few $1,000s. And if there's something wrong with the baby, they bill the insurance companies that are certainly giving them a lot more money than you and I would provide if our babies were born unhealthy through our provincial health care. So our government sees it as financially wise. That makes it more secure than any matter of the heart or social justice matter. And I try to explain that to other governments. So that was a long answer. Sorry, I do that.
No, that's okay.
That's perfect. So your second child, it was also born with surrogacy and donation?
Yes. So Janelle was born almost 13 years ago. Her birthday's next month. She's named after my mother, Jenny, whereas Etta's named after my grandmother, Etta.
Oh, cute.
And Janelle, had a surrogate through one of the big agencies in Canada, and it was an amazing journey. And our surrogate had been a surrogate once before. The agency really focused on selecting her so I would have a good journey. Um, we became friends. And she was so touched by the experience with us that she went to her husband after the birth and said, I really want a daughter. They had one little boy.
Aw.
And he was adamant that they were only going to have one child. And then I got involved as a gift back to her. What else could I give her? I wasn't even allowed to give her flowers based on the law. So I said, well, the one thing I can do that I won't get arrested for is bully him into letting him have another baby. And they had a girl whose
Oh,
birthday was just a few days ago.
oh,
So,
that's so special.
and on her fireplace mantle was a picture, still is, I think, of my two daughters.
Yeah.
So she said she would adopt Etta as her surrogate baby as well, because
Oh,
she knew Etta didn't have a relationship with her surrogate, which is really touching.
that's
So I had this
beautiful.
amazing experience and this nasty one. And I see my job as preventing people from having a bad one. To me, it's most important that they have a beautiful and safe journey.
Yeah, that is absolutely what we try to do, and it's it is hard. You're asking three or two perfect strangers to trust each other, and everyone is human, and everyone makes mistakes, and everyone says dumb things sometimes, but that is what we're here for, to make it
And I think
better.
that's why overall, why the two or three perfect strangers who have signed up to help you sign up to help you too,
Yeah,
is because
They
they
want to
want
help you.
they want to give you that peaceful,
Yeah.
calm.
And I think it's important for everyone to know that I am eternally grateful to the first surrogate.
Yeah.
An hour after Etta was born, I went into her room so she could hold Etta and I could thank her. And we hugged. Like, she didn't want to be pathological. It's a mental illness. It's a
Yeah.
personality disorder. You can't just stop it.
Yeah.
She had 4 children, and it was heartbreaking. And she had many lucid moments. And in the lucid moments, she had to have known what she was like, and it had to be heartbreaking. And I forced my husband the next day before she left the hospital to go in again, and she held Etta, and it was beautiful. And she was crying and calling her sweet names and wishing us the best of luck. But what's sad is we couldn't have a relationship for Etta's sake because I never knew when it wouldn't be lucid. But I always knew in my heart that when I felt Etta was mature enough and old enough to deal with it, we would reach out and make the introduction because it's important for Etta's well-being. Um, I had to make sure she'd be old enough in case there was what I call nuclear fallout from it. And for a long time, when she was a young girl, Etta asked for that, but I didn't think that was the right time. Now that she is mature, she doesn't ask, so I'm waiting. But it will be there, and it is absolutely important. And I think for the surrogate, it probably is too. And it's still a way for me to say thank you because I've had clients, surrogate clients, and you have too, who have said the intended parents dropped me right after birth, and there was nothing more devastating for them.
Yeah.
And there may have been a reason why intended parents did that. Either the surrogate was making the relationship hard, or their own grief got in the way and they had to pretend it didn't happen.
Yeah.
Either way is pretty tragic in my mind and not good for the child, either way.
No.
So I think good agencies have a role in playing in telling this story. So I'm so honored that you're doing this and sharing it because it's very important for people to know, people who are looking at other countries in the world because of money or wait times have to understand that when you're bringing a surrogate from another country into another country to have a baby, there's no guarantee she's going to be able to stay there or that you're going to get a proper birth certificate and passport or that there isn't war. People are still going to Ukraine right now to do surrogacy as we speak. And they're
Really?
getting babies passed through snipers, and that cannot do anything but create high anxiety and ADHD. I just can't see it. And they don't have, in some countries they can't speak to the surrogate, so there can be no relationship. That means there will be no relationship for the child. Um, and they're not saving a heck of a lot of money. I was just on a call with a woman who's thinking of going to Georgia, there in the UK, And she said, it's just under 50,000 US and they have embryos. I said, well, that's about 90,000 Canadian today, sadly, for us.
Yeah.
But I said, you're talking about maybe another 10 to 20,000 not to go through this. And the stress of being in the UK and can you get the child out fast? You know, people are going to Argentina, which maybe doesn't have that political strife and the surrogate gets to stay home and has all that. But they're going to be there for 3 to 4 months post birth. Can they do that? That's stressful, not to have the support of family and friends. And today people can work remotely, so more people say sure, but they don't understand until they have their first baby. You need to be home.
Yeah.
You need your family. And the best experience anybody who's brought their first baby home has to agree is the moment you walk in the door
Oh,
Yeah.
and start your new life.
Yeah.
Like, to me, look at me. I'm
Yeah.
still remembering that moment. I feel it.
Yeah.
You know, there's nothing like that.
The birth and all of those things are so exciting and cool, but walking into your home with your baby is like nothing else. Yeah.
Yeah, and I want my clients call me after the next day and say, "Yeah, you were right." And
Yeah.
they're, we're not supposed to say "I told you so," but in this practice, there's so much "I told you so" that everybody loves hearing.
Yeah. That's so cute. So, Cindy, do you think that with Etta having like her adopted surrogate mom, do you think that maybe that's why she doesn't ask anymore?
It may be.
Yeah.
We're very fortunate. My children both know they're probably the most famous surrogacy children in the world because I tell their story at all of these conferences around the world.
Okay.
And when I can, I flash their photos. And so they're probably, at first, when they were younger, that was cool. Now they're teenagers, so they're really pissed off about it. But everything I do pisses them off, so that's all normal. And in a way, for me, as I hear, what people say about raising a 15-year-old girl, that mine is normal means so much more to me.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Saying my daughter, as difficult as the moments may be right now, is normal.
Yeah.
Is like, wow.
Yeah. What a relief.
And egg donation and surrogacy still gives you a normal kid.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah. And I learned that when they were babies. Like every thought I had every day, it wasn't, they're not mine, they're not mine. It was, is this the right formula? Is this the best stroller? Is this the best diaper? Is this the best this? The first birthday party almost killed me with stress. I mean, I did murder trials for, the Outlaws motorcycle gang, but there I was in Party City choosing between Cinderella and Snow White plates, falling apart on the floor sobbing. And another mother had to come up to me and say, "First birthday?
Yeah.
Let me help you."
Yeah.
It's like, I get this wrong, I'm doomed for life.
Yeah. Because they're mine. They're mine. Yeah.
I have friends who are surgeons who say, "Yeah, I've done open heart surgery. The first birthday party, whoa, stress."
Yeah, it was stressful. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So tell us, if you had a magic wand right now with just thinking globally of surrogacy in Canada, what would you fix right now? Like where...
I have such a vision. I have to plug Cameron Harold here, the great visionary for all businesses. Vivid vision for life, business, everything. So I am writing a vivid vision for Hope Springs in 3 years from now, but I've been writing it in my head forever. And part of it is the vivid vision for surrogacy in Canada that I first started lobbying for an hour after Etta's birth. And the first thing I did was the agency that ultimately helped me with the second baby had received a letter during the pregnancy with Etta when I was a criminal lawyer saying, we see, because they were developing the next agency, we see that you are linked to an American agency that, pays donors and surrogates, but we're concerned that that link means you may be doing that, and we have a series of questions. And she took that letter to my fertility lawyer, who said, I think you need a criminal lawyer to answer this. And I know just the perfect one because she's also doing a fertility journey with a surrogate who's giving her a rough time and doesn't have an agency. So she introduced us, and I wrote this letter to Health Canada saying, oh my God, what my husband and I would not have paid today to have had the assistance of an agency so we wouldn't be going through this. And I fault you, Government of Canada, for not protecting us because the real vulnerable people you foolishly think are the surrogates. No, they're educated women in Canada. The real vulnerable people are the intended parents who are desperate. They're people who are desperate to get a new kidney who we know pay for it on the black market and may die. But parents are paying for this under the table. They're getting scammed by people all over the world. And you need to do something to protect us. And it's not regulation, it's opening. You need to come out and say, agencies are amazing. Everyone should use one. And that was what they said in the letter. And I got the first letter in Canada openly endorsing agencies in Canada that led to a new opening and others. So that was my first foray before I became really a fertility lawyer. I did that as a criminal lawyer. And I wanted to continue with that. So, I've been to Ottawa many times to meet with MPs on our days on the hills that Anu was a part of as well, and speaking to Health Canada. These are all the things, but it was also like COVID, for example. Everybody froze. We were in Ottawa for the reading of a second bill on surrogacy in the Senate to dispense with the criminal sanctions and the prohibitions against paying. We wanted to decriminalize it. That's the lawyer language. I'm looking for a layperson term. So it's a criminal offense to pay. We wanted to take that away and make it okay, like in the US. And it was before the Senate for the second reading on March 12th of 2020. And we were waiting in our hotel lobby to gather to go over to Parliament, and people from Anu were there. And we were watching the news in the lobby waiting for everyone, and they were talking about a teacher strike in Ontario. It was the first week of my children's March break. They were in private school, so they had 2 weeks. And I was laughing, saying, oh, the teachers union and the board they're just trying to get more money. So the government's shutting down school to save money that they probably just gave them all. That was before COVID, when all parents thought teachers were, the lives. 2 days into COVID, everybody thought teachers were like the best thing since sliced bread, and we worship their feet. And I still do. So 2 days of homeschooling changed our minds on the value of teachers, didn't it? But that's what we thought it was, a scam. And we went to Senate, and then we're hearing all these senators yelling at the head of the Senate, who was a liberal, saying, when is this government going to shut down airports for this coronavirus thing from China? That's how they were talking about it. Every other country is doing it. All over Europe, they're doing it. And why aren't we? And I looked at the people who were still in the room at the time, because many had to leave, and I said, we need to get home. And we need to start calling our clients who are foreigners and say, this is going down. When's your baby? Let's get them on a plane. And we got home that night, and the next day on the 13th, the government announced that our airports would close on the 16th, and the border over the US would shut down the Friday night. At 11 o'clock that night, I got on the phone with the Deputy Policy Director of Immigration and Citizenship Canada, so the person who stays regardless of an election and writes policy. And I said, we have a problem. We have foreigners who need to come here for the birth of their babies. And she said, what now? Essentially. And I explained it to her, and she said, geez, I need to get Transport, Health Canada, and Foreign Affairs on this call. All the people like her policymakers. So that was the call we had. The Minister of Transport was Marc Garneau, a former astronaut who was in charge of getting planes. and they didn't quite understand. They thought we were sending surrogates to other countries to have babies, and I said, it's not rocket science. I got and then immediately said, I'm sorry, you guys are working 24/7 in cabinet, no sleep. And I'm sure, sadly, I'm not the first person to say that to a astronaut. I wanted to be, but I got to do it. But in the next 9 days, Justin Trudeau had his cabinet draft new legislation that called parents of unborn children parents. Completely problematic given abortion, which is a fetus is not a child until it's born. So how can you be a parent of nothing? You're a parent of that woman's body. You can't be.
Right.
So it took 9 days to get through that. And the way it's worded is so it's not to open Pandora's box on abortion, which we value. It says if you are having a baby via surrogacy, you will be considered a parent so that you may enter this country as a parent, because that was an exemption for people. So what it meant was foreigners had more rights as parents before birth than we did.
Yeah.
That was what I did. And not one of our clients, yours, every agency's, not one of them missed the birth of their baby as a result of the 9 days I spent in this room with an extra phone line. I still have a landline because I'm old. My cell phone and a special line taking calls from the government of Canada. Weirdest times.
I believe that.
Sitting here like, I cannot fail. This is the ultimate jury trial that I must win for the world. But I got calls in the middle of the night with like, plane going to Milan on Sunday. Click. And it'd say Government of Canada. So then I would write letters to all of the agencies like yours and say, hey, Lorraine, you got any clients in Italy or Madrid? Do you have a client in Spain? Get them, send me their passport information, get them ready for Sunday to go to the airport. And it was like, trust me. And they had to call their clients and say, you need to give Cindy Wasser, who's not your lawyer and you don't even know, your passport information and get to an airport on Sunday morning. And it was like, are you kidding us? And they just did it. It was like being in war, right? You get your passage out, pay this person money, and get on this boat and pray. But they all made it. And honestly, to this day, I'm not sure that some people even paid for those flights because they were all repatriation flights that our government paid for with Air Canada. So if they had seats, they put intended parents on them.
So if you have
to say,
when you talk to new intended parents, what's one piece of advice you give them?
Have a good lawyer, have a good agency. So it's one piece of advice is pick amazing service providers. Your clinic, agency, and lawyer are what's going to get you the best journey possible. You do not play around with that.
What about what's one? Because I know you definitely, we've talked a lot about you helping intended parents, but you help surrogates and egg donors as well. What's one piece of advice you give a surrogate and a donor?
Be aligned with an amazing agency for support, have an amazing clinic for success and understanding, and have an amazing lawyer who fights for you. And that's what Hope Springs does. I am on all those Facebook pages I can find saying, surrogates saying I got ripped off, independent journeys. Very important. I respect them, but you better have a really good lawyer for that because you don't have an agency and you probably don't feel visible with a voice at your clinic, from my experience. So your lawyer is your voice. And your lawyer had, why is this happening? Who's your lawyer? How did this not be in your contract? What did your lawyer tell you about making sure you didn't get ripped off? Prevention is more important than fixing the mess. I'm all about prevention. So is there a trust account that your IPs are setting up? Do you have a debit card? How do you know they'll keep reinstating it? What's the plan? Let me talk to their lawyer. So surrogates are the most incredible women as are donors. I keep saying surrogates, but I want to be clear, I mean both. It's just how we speak, unfortunately. Donors obviously are goddesses to me. I couldn't be a mother without them. But donors and surrogates need to feel comfortable to keep doing this. And their families are rock stars that we forget about putting up with it. especially the surrogate's family, because she's carrying this thing for 9 months. There are many days where she's sick and tired, and the partner is managing everything in the house and for the kids, and the kids can't be get mummy's attention or love because mummy has nothing to give, no more bandwidth, and physically ill. And the whole family is participating in this for complete strangers. So we need to recognize that and tell surrogates as lawyers, as educators and agencies that your family needs need to be discussed. And that's why we say, no, you don't need your partner to be on a contract. This is your body. But we certainly need your family to support you. If you think you're going to do this and not tell them, that's not going to be good for you.
Yeah.
There's no legal requirement. That I want to make sure of. But we want you to have the support, and not your family, your extended family, your friends. It's a huge thing. And the intended parents, if they're far away, can't be there with chicken soup and flowers on a blue day.
Yeah.
They can order food for you, but they also feel really bad. And so it's a community thing. There isn't a client of mine I've ever spoken to who, when I say these things, doesn't say, oh no, I don't want to help her. I've never heard that.
Yeah.
You know? They're like, yeah, how do we make sure someone brings them flowers and chicken soup when it's a blue day? And so I actually have this clause in my contract that many surrogates want taken out, and their lawyers take it out because they don't talk to them about this. It's a mistake. I have a contract clause that says within 48 hours, the agency can go visit the surrogate, 48 hours notice, because I don't want the agency popping in on your house when it's a bad day and it's messy. Then you'll be mad at me. But 48 hours, if nobody's hearing from the surrogate, we need someone to go in there and say, are you okay? Because surrogates can be overwhelmed because of the hormones and everything happening realistically in their life, and then the hormones just... And overwhelmed is not stressed. Overwhelmed is beyond stressed. Overwhelmed is, I'm lying staring at the ceiling. And we want someone to go in there and then tell the intended parents, she needs groceries, she needs housekeeping, we've organized this, this, and this, and you're paying for it. And you're never to say a word to her about this.
Right.
More importantly, because the reason she's not responding is A, overwhelmed, she's staring at the ceiling, but B, before she got to that, she felt this was her fault, her failure, and loves these people and thinks they've spent so much money already that I'm not going to ask them to get me a housekeeper and a food delivery service. And you're shaking your head, yeah, like you know what I'm talking about, girl.
Yeah.
I know this because I fought my surrogates, both the one that was difficult and the wonderful one, to take a cleaning lady after birth.
Yeah.
The second one, I literally threatened that I would drive an hour and a half east of Toronto with my baby and clean her toilets if she didn't let me send someone. That's what it took.
Yeah.
And I said, you want me there cleaning your toilet? Because I've never cleaned a toilet. I don't know how to do it. It's going to be a mess. And I'm going to have a baby there. So then you have to look after my baby while I clean your toilet. So this is stupid. Just take the cleaning lady. And that's the conversations we had. Same with buying her maternity clothes. We made lunch of it after an ultrasound visit. And she picked out one pair of pants. I said, are you crazy? You're living in that for the next 6 months. And I said, I'm bullying you to go into the dressing room. And I called the manager and I said, that woman is carrying my baby for me. I want you to dress her for the next 6 months and longer as she loses the belly. And, 10 bags later, all of $2,000 at the time. It was like the cheapest clothing shopping I had ever done as a criminal lawyer because I had high-end suits and shoes. It was like amazing. And the expenses were about 20 grand. And I said to my husband, if I was pregnant as a criminal lawyer, it's 20,000 to rent clothing and the stupid Law Society black polyester robes for pregnancy. We got away with something cheaper than my clothing budget. My pregnant colleagues in criminal law, one of the most famous criminal defense lawyers is my friend. She had to wear Manolo Blancas when she stood on her feet. Those were the only shoes that worked for her. So there she was with these heels wobbling in the parking lot, this pregnant for both her pregnancies. Because cheap shoes killed her.
Yeah.
We're cross-examining police officers for 9 hours. We need good shoes.
Amen.
And that's the advice I want to give surrogates. Have someone do it.
No,
I'm even plugging for this. I need to plug this. Eurospot is a pelvic floor therapy franchise that's developed in Canada. They're building them all over Canada.
that's like the
It's
shock
pelvic
therapy thing, right?
pelvic floor therapy.
Yeah.
Instead of going to someone who teaches you how to put your fingers up your vagina and press around the clock.
Good.
But it's not fun and no one's doing it. This is you go to a place fully clothed, sit on a chair that sends
It's like a shock wave.
a microcurrent
Yeah.
up through your pelvic floor. And in 20 minutes, it's like you did 4,000 Kegels. And the kids have books and they can sit in the room and play for your 20 minutes. And it costs more, but I went to all the agencies, including ANU, and said, start telling everybody to specify this if there's one near the surrogate, not just pelvic floor therapy, but going to your spot, because it'll get her treated after 3 treatments. It's twice a week for like 6 weeks, but within the first 2, she will not have incontinence. And it can be part of her follow-up after she finishes. You're supposed to go every 3 or 4 months. If she's going to be a surrogate again, it should be done before the transfer. It will help the transfer to have a good pelvic floor.
Okay, Cindy, we are about to run out of time, but I really want to ask you 2 questions.
Okay.
If you could have dinner with anyone, living or dead, who would you pick?
Dead? Always Henry Kissinger.
I like that.
I think he was the most amazingly brilliant foreign policy maker in the world. And especially now with Israel and Palestine, I'd love for him to be alive, because I think if anyone could get through, it would have been him. Maybe he wasn't such a nice person on a personal level, but that's not what we would talk about. It would be, how did you do that? How does your mind work? Teach me.
Okay, and what's something that not many people know about you?
I'm so open and vulnerable. I don't know. I think everyone knows everything about me. I'm afraid of spiders, but a lot of people know that. I'm absolutely terrified. And like I said, I was terrified of the first birthday party.
First birthday
I come
party.
off as an extremely strong, badass woman, but quite frankly, I get very tired and scared, and I'm afraid, and I need help sometimes too. And my besties who know me know when to intervene. So that may be something that people don't know, that sometimes I get sad too.
I love that. That's what Mia and I are for each other.
Yeah. Thank you
Honestly,
for
Cindy, this
coming
was
and
incredible.
visiting with us. This was incredible. I think everyone is going to have learned so much from this visit. And thank you for taking the time to do that with us.
Yeah, for
This
all
was
of you.
my honor. I'm so glad Lorraine reached out to me to do this,
Yes.
because if anything comes of it, I hope it helps other intended parents, donors, and surrogates to know that they can have a safe and respectful journey. That's the most important thing. Best thing for the kids is to have
Truly.
had that.
Truly, that's our
Thank you
goal.
for all you've done for
So thank you
all
both.
of this.
And we'll see you soon. Maybe we'll do another one on
Yes,
different
I would
stuff.
love to do that. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you,
I
Cindy.
still have so much more to say.
I
We'll
know.
do another one.
We
We'll
will
have to
do another
one.
All right. Have a great
Bye,
afternoon.
Cindy.